Hello to all of you. We're getting ready to get started. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today for our webinar, Collaborative Spaces. I'm Janet Nelson, the Director of Library Markets for Demco, and I will be moderating today's session. Before we get started, I just wanted to go through some housekeeping details, and then I'll introduce our speaker, and she can start our presentation. On your screens, you should see a chat box on the right-hand side. If you have a question or are having any type of technical issue, please feel free to type something there, and we'll do our best to get back to you as quickly as we can. We will be pausing in the middle of the presentation and at the end of the session to answer questions. If something comes up during the session that you'd like clarification on or want to respond to, I encourage you to type it in, and we'll be compiling all your thoughts and questions and can address those during our breaks. If we don't get to your question during the session, we'll be sure to get answers and post them with the recorded webcast after the event. There's also specific contact information available for Tracy and myself that you should see on the screen right now. After the session, you can feel free to email us directly if you have specific questions that we may be able to help with. We are also using Twitter today, and the hashtag is #DemcoIdeas. You should be able to see that hashtag on the side of your screen in the chat box, and we'll be monitoring that feed for questions and comments as well. Just for fun, while I'm doing introductions, we're going to pop up a poll question on your screen. And our first question is, what is the status of the collaborative spaces in your library? You should see some options popping up on the screen. Take a minute to choose one, and we'll share your responses in a minute. Now, on to introductions. As I mentioned, I'm Janet Nelson, the Director of Library Markets for Demco, and I'm moderating today's session. We're always interested in knowing how to better serve the needs of our customers, and these webinars have really been a great way for us to do this. As learning styles have been evolving and the spaces that customers are looking for are changing, there's been much discussion around what it means to introduce collaborative spaces in libraries of all types. Today's presentation is going to walk you through some of the elements found in great collaborative spaces and how to introduce a variety of these spaces into your library. I'm pleased to introduce you to Tracy Lesneski, who will be our speaker. Tracy is a principal of the National Library Architecture and Design firm, MSR, and she has designed dozens of library interiors across the country. Her belief that smartly designed buildings improve lives ensures that her designs are beautiful, functional, and sustainable. Recent examples of her library work include the award-winning renovation and expansion of the Ramsey County Roseville Library and the new Hennepin County Library in Maple Grove, both in Minnesota. Current work includes transformations of the Madison, Wisconsin Central Library, which just had its grand opening, and Tulsa City County Central Library, which is currently in the building process. Tracy speaks regularly at national library conferences, including a presentation on the future of the library at the 2012 ALA Annual Conference and about library design at the 2013 ALA Annual Conference. Tracy, we're going to put the controls into your capable hands, and you can get started when you're ready.
Thanks, Janet. I'm just going to grab this thing here. Okay, thank you very much, Janet. I'm glad to be here today to talk to you all about collaborative spaces, and it looked like from the attendee list there's a good mix between academic and public libraries, so that's fantastic. The talk should be geared very well to both types of libraries, but if you have specific questions that are to one or the other, please do let Janet know, and we'll try to address those in our time together. First, I want to get started with just a little bit of context. Why should we care about collaborative spaces in the first place? Our economy is in constant evolution, and the latest evolution has been from the knowledge economy to a network economy. The network economy is characterized by external partnerships, efficient collaborations, lean processes, and continual innovation. Continual innovation is a pretty key phrase there, I think. Customized work with a high variety in tasks is the norm, and repetitive tasks are being done more and more often by robots and software programs. Interestingly, just late last week, MarketWatch published a top 10 disappearing jobs report. And these are the jobs that have the highest rates of decline for the past 10 years running. And 5 of the 10 of those on that list were due to advances in automation. And 2 were because of changes in the print industry, but I don't think we'll go there today. We can save that for another webinar topic, perhaps. The network economy, then. The critical skills most needed now are effective group working, collaboration skills, critical problem solving, and critical thinking skills. Community members and students need to learn how to think critically, how to problem solve, and how to find information that they need in this very rich environment that we have now. And this requires a different model of learning space, immersing people in content and helping them create content and not just passively receive it. So learning spaces, including those in the library, must focus on experiential, hands-on learning and on creating spaces for collaboration. Once considered extras for libraries, these types of spaces and activities are no longer the exception but the rule. The definition of library is continuing to evolve and expand to encapsulate all kinds of learning. Collaboration is not just for adults, just as interactive spaces and fixtures are not just for children. Hands-on and collaborative learning touch all parts of our culture, our education, and our businesses. So this model doesn't really meet today's needs. Instead, this is more in line with what's needed to meet the needs of your customers today, including spaces for collaboration. Why should a library worry about creating great places for collaboration? Because the library is called upon to be a partner in so many ways. The library is a partner in education, both directly and indirectly, supporting the range from homeschoolers to universities, providing resources for both institutions and individuals. The library is a partner in innovation by providing resources, tools, space, and programs that spark new ideas and interests and that allow people to come together. The library is a partner in developing communication skills, writing centers, distance learning, educational technologies. The library is the great equalizer for communities and universities. Many people, in order not to be left behind, need tools that they can only get access to through the library. Many people practice skills at the library that they cannot practice elsewhere in their daily lives. The Webster Dictionary defines collaboration as, quote, working with another person or group in order to achieve or do something, unquote. That's pretty broad. And it's also, I think, a good reminder that people are collaborating at many levels, in many activities, and at many scales. So then, what makes a great collaborative space? When I think about collaboration and what makes a space specially suited for it, I think of 5 metrics. How adaptable is the space to meet evolving and varying needs? Can the participants readily and easily share their knowledge? Are the collaborators able to do their work without disturbing others? Is there the right balance between providing tools and providing white space? And is the space in the right place to facilitate collaboration? I'm going to touch on each of these aspects in a little bit more detail. And I'll start with adaptability. Collaboration occurs in a wide variety of ways across a wide variety of tasks and in varying numbers of people. This slide that looks a little bit like dominoes is actually meant to show that there's varying degrees between lots of people at the top to just solitary participation in each of these activities at the bottom. People come to libraries for so many reasons. The spectrum includes everything from relaxing and playing to intense research and study. And they may be coming to the library for individual work in each of these areas to be sure, but just as often they are looking to do these activities with others. In other words, they're looking to collaborate. So we have to design libraries to support the continuum of interaction that exists in any and all of the ways that people wish to collaborate, whether through working from a distance through technologies, creating something tangible in a maker lab, or in a simple face-to-face meeting. Yet, it is not at all practical, nor I would say even necessary, to design a customized space for each possible type of need. And those needs will surely continue to change and evolve as new skills are needed over time. So adaptability is very important. Most people think about furniture when they hear adaptable or flexible, but I advocate for a broader scale of flexibility in order to achieve graceful adaptation of library spaces. This image represents scales of adaptability, from interior organization that pushes plumbed and built, therefore less flexible spaces to the edges of the building, to a lighting scheme that doesn't lock in a particular use, to a raised floor that allows for true plug-and-play changeability and also flexibility with HVAC. And then, of course, the furniture and fixtures are both adaptable and movable. Designing spaces for double or even triple duty is also important. In this case, a program room can be closed down and used for collaboration and presentation, but it opens up to the library and becomes a hands-on lab for children in off hours. And remember, play is collaboration too. These next 4 images will show how a learning space at Drexel University is easily reconfigured through movable walls and furnishings to create different types of space, from small lecture to larger group settings open to all. And note that with different furniture than is shown in this image, this room could be a setting with many small collaborative zones. And since those moving walls are all pinnable, many types of discussions and knowledge sharing can simultaneously take place. The same space can be open as in the previous slide or more closed down like it is here. And it can also be subdivided to allow breakout spaces as shown on the left. Same furniture, same walls, same technology, just able to reconfigure at the user level through walls that slide and pivot. I'm going to just go back through a couple of those so you can see how that worked. Pretty simple idea. A similar example of flexibility, this time using merely furniture and flexibility in the furniture arrangements, starting with conversation prep and small group discussion, moving to a group conversation, or in this case a critique, and then to a meeting setup. Again, same room, same technologies, same furniture, just able to easily reconfigure. And don't forget staff areas. Staff need opportunities to collaborate too. And this can happen right within the work area with a little flexibility built in. So here we have pivoting doors that work with furniture on casters. So staff can have privacy when needed, but open up their workstation to allow easy collaboration when desired. Close it down, open it up. Okay, tenet number 2, level the playing field by allowing all participants to have equal access to the information. This one probably comes pretty naturally in many ways for librarians. Participation in a collaborative venture means that participants must have equal access to the knowledge pool to be highly effective partners. Likewise, they must also be able to share their own knowledge to contribute to that pool. Effective collaboration requires that this knowledge sharing is done in such a way that participation can be seamless. This can be done in simple ways, such as providing pin-up space that everyone can view and therefore partake in and edit the information. Or it can mean access to technologies that allow real-time inputs and outputs, such as you see here and here. People are even more empowered to collaborate when the technology is accessible and easy to use, and great strides have been made in the furniture industry to make ease of use a reality. Those of you who are at ALA, I'm sure, saw many examples of that. The furniture that we use sends cues about collaboration. Allowing each person to be an equal at the table is another way to level the field. Circular tables, or tables such as this one, promote collaboration and a feeling of equality, whereas a table like this one has a clear leader. So keep in mind when you're creating a collaborative space our cultural subconscious. The two ends of a table are culturally understood to be the leadership and co-leadership positions. The seats immediately adjacent to those endpoints are influencing positions to the person at the head of the table because they have the ear of the leader. This is a great setup for running efficient meetings, but not really ideal for promoting equal participation in a collaborative venture. Of course, squares and rectangles can be made to act like circles, so it doesn't necessarily mean you need literally a round table. Collaborative play requires spaces that allow these learning experiences to be enjoyed fully without disruption of others. while still allowing tangential participation to people who are just learning the technologies or simply less inclined to jump right in because of their personality. Lots of different personalities and proclivities exist at your library, so leveling the field also includes allowing exposure to those who don't get it otherwise, but that it can happen on their own terms. The kinds of collaborations taking place in libraries are expanding. Where once collaboration meant talking or perhaps working together on a file, now it can mean integration of complex tools, visual and oral work, integration with people scattered across the globe. So if the library is truly a partner in innovation, education, and communication, tools that facilitate these things are important to offer. And the great news here is that, just like with the other technologies I was talking about, many of these kinds of things are on the market now, and so they're more accessibly priced than they have been in the past. And of course, sometimes collaboration isn't about technology at all. It's about experiencing something together to create new knowledge or to innovate. And that's what's so powerful and attractive about the makerspaces finding their way into libraries of all kinds all over the globe. Collaboration takes many shapes indeed. So providing spaces that can accommodate all manner of collaboration is important. In this case, users of the room can use technology or clear it away. The walls allow both pins and magnets all the way around so people can surround themselves with their project. The information is at everyone's fingertips, easily viewed and manipulated by all involved in the collaborative venture. And much of what makes this room a success is actually just the ability to clear things away and have a lot of open space. The library's role as the great equalizer is so important. As I've already said, many tools and technologies designed for collaboration and interaction have quickly become mainstays of our culture, of business, and of education. Yet many people do not have access to these tools and technologies in their daily lives. So libraries offering these tools will ensure that those without access can learn about and use them, thereby leveling the field on the macro scale. All right, before we continue with the third tenet, I'm going to pause and see if Janet has any questions coming in. Janet?
We do have a question, but before we do that, I just want to ask another poll question. We had such great feedback from the last one. It looks like a lot of you are really working on some collaborative spaces right now. Our next question is, what types of collaborative spaces would you like to add to your library? On this one, you can choose more than one answer. And if you have something that's different than what we have on the screen, then feel free to chat that into the chat box too, so we can learn about the other types of spaces that you may be working with. The other question that we have a number of school customers on the line, and if you have a tight budget to work with and want to start creating collaborative spaces, what would you start with so you can build on it later?
That's a great question, and I imagine pretty relevant to a lot of people who are looking for ways to bring new ways of library service or new parts of library service into their libraries. I think probably the first thing that I would think about is how you can first of all carve out the square footage for a collaborative space. We'll be talking a little bit later about acoustics and how that can sometimes be a little bit of an issue for libraries when they're thinking about creating these different kinds of spaces. So being able to find a little bit of space that's A, in a good location, but B, has enough buffer around it that it won't be an impediment to others who are trying to do other kinds of tasks in your library would be the first step. And sometimes that means thinking about the resources that you've got on hand already and determining if there are things that could be modified in such a way that it would help free up space. The next thing I think I would do is to think about the kind of furnishings that you've already got that could be reconfigured in such a way to create a more collaborative kind of zone. In that last section we were talking about how table size, table configuration can have a lot to do with how collaborative people will feel. So if you've got a couple of small tables that could be combined into a square that sort of acts like a circle, that might be a good place to start.
Perfect. That's really helpful information, Tracy. At this point, I think what we will do is move ahead. But before we do that, I just wanted to just bring people's attention to we posted the poll results, and it looks like flexible meeting space is one of the things that you're most likely to want to add, followed by a tie between group study areas, small group study areas, and maker spaces. So a lot of different things going on there. So we will go ahead and move on, and then we'll save all the rest of the questions until the end.
Great. Thank you, Janet. Okay, getting back to the presentation. The third tenet is zoning. As I mentioned, library users come with their own expectations for how they plan to use your library, whether to work alone, collaborate with others, or quickly grab something and go. And often, as I just mentioned in answering that question, a lot of these activities or uses take place in one open, flexible library space. So that can cause a little bit of conflict in terms of sound versus people who are looking for a different kind of activity in your library. So it's important then to define the use and offer visual cues so people know where they should be quiet and where it's okay to collaborate. This says quiet. This area of the library has a lower ceiling, a general scale that's more intimate than its immediate surroundings. The lighting is different. It's at a lower level, and it's a different kind of lighting, a little softer, a little warmer. The materials are complementary to the whole of the interior, but they're richer. They have a different texture. And all of these visual cues signal a different use, and therefore a different behavior. Whereas, in the same library, just a different part of it, this says active. The lighting is brighter, the space is more open, it's higher scaled, the materials are light and translucent, suggesting mobility and activity, so you're welcome to collaborate here. Scale and location of furnishings can also be visual cues for people. The large scale of these tables make collaboration inherently harder, so customers looking to do individual work gravitate here. Whereas the location and scale of this table is clearly understood to invite collaboration. The furnishings layout itself can also serve as a cue to behavior. These lounge seats are arranged in a conversational layout, signaling that conversation, and therefore collaboration, would be welcome here. Visual cues to zoning can be done in a lot of different ways, and very simple ways. Lighting, like I was referring to in that other slide, can define a space. A niche that contains tools and furniture for a specific kind of activity, like you see in the back of that slide. A niche that has a place for people to sit around a table together, but also has a whiteboard where ideas can be put up on the wall, again, leveling the field, allowing everybody to see the ideas. A simple area rug or a change in flooring can also signal that there's a zone there, a sort of space without creating a space with walls. The fourth tenet is providing white space, which I refer to kind of as mental downtime. Our brains are wired to look for patterns. I bet most of you see a white triangle here and a white square here. Yet there wasn't a triangle and there isn't a square. What's actually drawn are circles with wedges removed from them. In what originates in a survival tactic, our brains seek patterns, and we have an innate ability and a wired-in need to make order out of our surroundings through that pattern seeking. Otherwise, all the individual visual inputs that we're confronted with everywhere all day long would exhaust and overwhelm us, and we might not see that man-eating animal through the trees. This is important to remember when designing any learning space, including those for collaboration. There are many, many tools available to facilitate collaboration, and they're great. But that doesn't necessarily mean that all of them should be visible or present at all times. Clutter can confuse our minds and can distract us. Clarity and focus can result from mentally and physically clearing the decks. So consider some of these ways to provide literal and figurative white space. Provide a gadget-free experience as an option. The slide that looked like dominoes that I showed before was showing all the different kinds of tasks that people come to your library for. And some of those would be very well served with technology, but just as easily served without. So recognize that some people come to the library still looking for that gadget-free or quiet experience. Sometimes collaboration requires nothing more than a room and some peace and quiet. So for those of you who are asking about budget-conscious kinds of ways to create collaboration, keep that in mind. You may not need anything more than what you've already got. You just need to find the square footage for it. In this case, the warmth of the brick, the quality of the daylight, a table with comfortable chairs, these are all the perfect crutch for allowing a free-flowing conversation to happen. Fresh air can also open the mind. If your site and your climate allows, consider providing collaborative options outdoors. And for those of you who may be skeptical about that possibility, this is in Minnesota, smack dab in the middle of Minnesota, where it's definitely cold. So if it can be done here, it can be done anywhere. Collaboration can be intense at times. So daylight and view, which have the effect of opening minds to think expansively, calming the spirit, considering new ideas, this can help enforce a team dynamic and goodwill. So think about spaces that allow for daylight and view. Take a cue from loft living, where many varied activities are very efficiently packed into a very small area. So use layering to conceal tools, or in this case a Murphy bed, when white space is needed, and then reveal them when the tools are desired. In this case, white space is achieved by closing off a room that otherwise would be open to daylight and views and the passersby by using sliding pin-up panels in front of the glass. So you see them stacked to the left and right of this glass box, whereas in this slide, the panels close down the room visually. And then those panels, note, can also be used for collaborative space on the outside of the room. So there's adaptability and double duty coming into play there again. Consider providing storage in collaborative areas so that tools, furniture, marker boards, pens, paper, technology, etc. are handy but can also be cleared away. Or so furnishings can be cleared away so large-scale collaborations or projects have the room that they need. Sometimes white space is achieved by being able to change lighting or change views to affect the participants' focus. Use tiered lighting to allow variety to suit the need. What I mean by tiered lighting is a mixture of daylight, ambient, which is overall lighting, and task lighting. So these two slides that I'll do in a row here show how a meeting space is transformed for a general collaborative meeting to one with more intense focus. Simple changes such as using a curtain for privacy along that back glass wall. Note the back wall there is open and glass and then closes down. Blackout shades to close out the daylight, and then reconfigurable furnishings. They all play a role in creating figural white space. All right, some of the best collaborations are serendipitous. So planning for the unplanned is also an important part of designing for collaboration. The final tenet is opportunity. One never knows where you might bump into a collaborator or when an idea grabs you and you just have to talk to someone about it. So create opportunities for spontaneous collaboration along well-traveled areas. Locate spaces that invite collaboration, like a cafe near busy walkways and likely meeting places. Provide opportunities to pause on the path to collaborative spaces as a type of breakout space or as a primer for the collaboration that's about to take place. In this case, there's a room at the top of this sitting stair, but folks have the opportunity to either start or continue a conversation on the path to or from that room. Sometimes there's a set time for collaboration to take place, but the conversation is so engaging that people want to continue it So provide the opportunity to be able to do that. Provide seating near interactive zones to allow natural spillover and enhanced working relationships. Provide lounge chairs in your maker spaces, for example. Consider how people move both through your library, around the building, and up and down through it. And consider whether there is an opportunity for collaboration along those paths, or even on those paths. Collaboration can occur just about anywhere. As long as you've zoned your library as previously discussed, it will. Thanks for spending time listening to me talk about collaborative spaces. I believe we still have time for more questions. Janet?
Yeah, we definitely have time for some questions. We're going to ask one last poll question before we get into the final questions. And if anyone has any additional questions, please feel free to chat them in, because we'll have plenty of time to answer anything that you might be interested in learning more about that you haven't heard about yet for sure, or if you want to elaborate on other things. The poll question that we want to close with on that is, what are your customers looking for in a collaborative space? And this is another one where you can choose more than one answer. So if you want to take a minute to do that, I will start into some of the other questions. The first one, if it is an outside space, Tracy, you mentioned outside spaces, what is the right equipment for that type of space?
I think it would depend on the setting of that outdoor space. For example, the slide that I showed was in front of a little pond and walking paths. So the kinds of furnishings and what we provided there was basically a porch and some chairs that could be configured to be either a solitary kind of experience or a more collaborative one. And then there's some tables available for people to set their things. I think if you were in a more urban setting, that perhaps you might want to consider some screening to keep noises of traffic or the distractions of passersby from distracting the people who are trying to collaborate, or from being so loud, for example, that it would be difficult to hear one another. So I think it depends on where your outdoor setting or opportunity would be.
Perfect. That's really helpful. Another question that we have here. I have an administrator buying comfy couches and overstuffed chairs, throwing them into the library space with no rhyme or reason, and thinking that they've modernized the space. Do you have any suggestions on how I might approach that situation?
Well, hopefully some of the introduction of this talk helps people be able to frame a conversation with administrators or board members or others who have ideas about what's needed in the library. I think expanding that conversation to take into consideration the many different ways that people need to collaborate and the other kinds of needs that aren't about collaboration will help those kinds of folk to understand that there's a little more to it than just putting a couple of chairs in a corner. You might want to talk about the tenet of zoning, for example, and you might want to talk about the need for adaptability and flexibility even within the collaborative space itself. You might want to point out that there's often need for technologies and things that a couple of chairs might not solve. So maybe expanding the conversation in some way to get at the root of what is needed for your particular library would help in that conversation to broaden the focus a little bit.
Great. Additional questions here. It kind of would go along with the zoning a little bit, I think, but we have several people who are interested in understanding how to lower sound levels or provide soundproofing in spaces.
I'm sorry, Janet, I missed the last part of that question.
Okay, it was how to lower sound levels or put soundproofing into spaces.
Okay, spaces for collaboration. So if zoning isn't doing enough for you to keep sound from being an issue, you might consider the kinds of furnishings that you've got in your collaborative zone to make sure that there's enough soft material around to help absorb some of the sound. Now that said, there's still going to be some times where collaborations are boisterous, which is great because we want people to be engaged and enjoying one another in your library. So you may need to bring in other materials, which could be soft screening kinds of materials. I had that slide too where you see a curtain kind of material that could be used both for privacy and for sound, for trapping some sound. And those materials don't have to be opaque. I can sort of feel some librarians on the line that might be worried about too much privacy in some cases. So certainly they can still have some visual access and not be opaque. But there are other considerations regarding sound that one needs to be aware of, and that's that sound often is a factor of geometry, and where a space is located can have a lot to do with how well that sound travels. I'm not an acoustician, and I only play one on TV, so I don't have the scientific language to speak to this with a whole lot of authority, but I can tell you that there are geometries to take into consideration just as much as materials, and we can get pretty far with zoning, and we can get, that's probably your very first defense mechanism, but thinking too about the materials around you, including the floor, and where the sound would be coming from and going to is a pretty important consideration. One more thing I didn't say about zoning earlier that I think is important is grouping like activities. The slides that I was showing, there was the woman who was sitting at a table, and which was kind of clearly a quiet area of the library. That quiet area isn't located adjacent to that loud active space. It's got a buffer of other like activities, so that you're kind of grouping, you're zoning like with like and mitigating as much as possible that conflict.
That's very helpful, Tracy. One other thing that I've seen used as well, too, is sometimes your furniture, there are choices in furniture that you can use where the furniture kind of comes around you and helps to create some of that acoustic cushioning, if you will, to try to help minimize that as well. So that would just be one other option that I can think of that I've seen used.
That's great, yeah.
Another question that we have here, how do you determine the needs of your specific community for what should be in the creative space?
A creative space meaning a maker kind of space, I'm assuming. I think you all know your communities well, whether it's a campus community or a public library kind of situation. You know what people are coming in to ask for. You know the demographics and where the needs are most often. So I would say that if you have a community, for example, that is looking for, well, actually, here's an example. I'll say Madison, Wisconsin, the library that just opened this last fall is, or this last month, I should say. It's only October. Is a community that has a lot of artists and a community that has a deep interest in art and supporting its arts base. So that particular system has instituted a makerly program which spans all of its buildings called the Bubbler, which those of you who know Wisconsin would know that that's kind of a clever little term because that's what Wisconsinites call drinking fountains. But they have a more artist-makerly kind of theme associated with their maker spaces because that fits with their community style. And that their program is continuing to develop, so that's not to say that's all what it's about, but it does have a very hands-on, kind of tangible, craft-oriented, and I mean craft in the broadest sense of the term, kind of focus. So their makerspaces have big tables where people can stand around or sit around them and make things. They've got lots of materials. They've got magnet boards and all kinds of things. Now they've also got a technology-rich kind of makerspace as well. It's not just the hands-on craft kind of items. Whereas another kind of community or a campus might have more needs for learning about technology. Maybe their community is located in a place where web development and real technology-rich kinds of skills are the focus, or are the kind of main requirement or request, I should say. In that case, maybe you want to focus your makerspace more on that really technology-rich kind of experience, where there's a lot of computers with various softwares that are available, where you might have a green screen, you might have a variety of cameras and things. So I think part of understanding how to figure that out is taking a look at what gets requested most, but it also means understanding your community well, which I think most librarians do.
Excellent answer, Tracy. Very helpful again. This one kind of goes along with your makerspace comments, and I think earlier you had mentioned possibly having lounge chairs in a makerspace, and we just had a question on why you might want that.
Yeah, I think I was talking about that when I was mentioning spillover. There's a lot of activities that happen that prompt the desire for further conversation or investigation, and that's such a big part of innovating and a big part of collaborating. Collaboration is not a one-size-fits-all kind of proposition, nor is it only something that should happen around a table. So even in makerspaces where there's an emphasis on materials and hands-on learning in all the ways that that can happen through technology or not, there will be times where it might be really beneficial for somebody to say, hey, look at what we just did. I wonder what would happen if, and you might not have all the time or tools available right at that moment to be able to investigate, so maybe you want to sit and talk about it a little bit and continue to brainstorm and come up with alternative ideas. So the suggestion of having some sort of soft seating in there is about kind of the psychology of a casual kind of conversation that could be extended. Sometimes sitting around a table feels sort of formal and has a different effect on people's abilities to open their mind and continue to innovate and collaborate, whereas soft seating often has the ability to kind of allow people to relax and expand their minds in a way that they might not otherwise.
Those were some great comments that I haven't really thought about before, so that was, again, really helpful. Another one on a little bit different line. Do you have experience addressing space on both policy and infrastructure levels? Have you found less need for policy with space design?
Well, that's a great question. I think that policy often does and should influence space design. And I hope that what the question is regarding in terms of policy is thinking about where the library system might be headed and what the focus is for growth and evolution within that library. Maybe the person asking the question meant something different than what I'm thinking about policy, and perhaps they can chat in another, a redirect if I'm answering the wrong thing. So, but I will say that aligning space design with where a library strategically wants to take itself is really important. Just like you would want your web design to reflect the personality and the brand and the kind of strategic direction of your library, the buildings should do that as well. So there should not be a disconnect. If the library is saying we're about customer service and we want to be as open and helpful and proactive in helping you as possible. But you come into the library and there's this huge service desk and nobody wants to meet with you and look you in the eye. And shelves are kind of the only thing you see, and you don't see an opportunity to engage with people, staff, let alone other people. That sends kind of a disconnected signal. So it's very important, I think, for libraries to take a step back and think about what are the strategic initiatives, what are they saying is important to the community, and what are they saying to themselves they are all about. If early literacy is your big focus, or if job training is your big focus, whatever those kind of key initiatives that you've set in place really ought to trickle down into everything, and that has a big effect on how space is both laid out and the kinds of fixtures and furnishings that you use.
A lot of great questions here. I'm going to continue to ask some of these because we have enough time left here, and we have several more. I work in an area with very small square footage. How do I create collaborative space even if all I have to work with is a round table?
Well, I think that's great, actually. Round tables are really very good for collaborating, as we talked about before. The small space issue is not a unique one, of course, and that was kind of the point I was trying to make about adaptability and flexibility. So that round table probably is being pressed into all kinds of service for you throughout the course of the day. And the key would be, I think, then to locate it in such a place where it clearly can invite collaboration at times. But if it needs to be used for something else, it can be used for that as well. So if you think about the patterns of use throughout your library's day, kind of think through the different user groups and what their use patterns tend to be, because most libraries have a pretty typical. Think about typical, not the exception when you're doing something like this, because there will always be exceptions. And you can kind of plan out where that location would be. When I am talking with clients, I often will talk about the 80-20 rule when I'm reminding people that, yes, there will be that exception and there will be this exception, but 80% of the time, in this case, where would that table make the most sense to allow people to collaborate with it? And alternatively, throughout the course of the day, if it needs to be used for something else, where would it need to be? I hope that gets at the answer well enough there.
Oh, I think that was perfect. Would you recommend bringing in opinions from your patrons?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think, throughout the course of libraries, the design of libraries has continued to evolve, and people's perceptions about what a library should and could do continues to evolve along with it. And we're getting a little bit caught up now, I think. The public is getting more caught up than it has been in the past with what a library can and should be to its community, whether the campus community or the community in a public library or for a public library. So getting their opinion about how they want to use your building is a very important thing. Often we go to conferences and we hear people talking about all kinds of things and we think, oh yeah, we should totally do that at our library, without a whole lot of thought about whether that really fits the need of what your particular community has. I was talking a little bit before regarding that other question about how every community kind of has its own personality in terms of what its base members really need. And the library's role, or part of it, is to figure out what that is and provide it, fill in that hole. So finding out from their perspective what is needed is a really important step, I think, especially if you're embarking on a pretty significant kind of redo or new building. Community input through survey, through focus group, through all the different ways that you can do that is really important. There's a academic library in the Minneapolis area that recently put just a whiteboard, on a little easel, and provided Post-it notes for students to write anything they wanted about what they wish the library could do or what they would like to be able to accomplish. So framing the question in a couple of different ways might be helpful at getting that input too, rather than just saying, what don't we have that you wish we did? You know, that's kind of a broad question for some people to be able to answer. You might think about framing it instead something like, what projects were you unable to complete this year that you wish you could have? Or did you come to the library and find something that you thought was amazing that you didn't know we had? Or kind of asking them in a more tangible or more specific way will often get you better input, which seems counterintuitive, I realize, but that's generally the case.
You know, this is a really important topic too, because it definitely comes up in pretty much all of our spaces webinars that we've done, just how important it is to really make your space be something that is reflective of your community and has the support of your community, because then you definitely get more buy-in as people are using your facilities, and they're very eager to continue to update and upgrade and do different new things. So I think that's all really great advice.
I think that's an excellent point, Janet. I was just going to add one more thing. I'm sorry. You know, sometimes too, I mean, I think there's a balance too. What you just said was exactly right on. We also need to know, though, that the library has a role in pushing a community forward just as much. So it can't all be only listening. It has to also be leading. So I just wanted to add that little point there too.
Right. I think that's a great point, and I know that there's even some people on the webinar today, I believe, who are doing that by going out and looking at different spaces and kind of seeing what's going on out there in other libraries, as well as other places in the community that people like to hang out. So a lot of good things that you can pull in that way. Okay. Another one that we have is, we are working on a technology makerspace. Do you have a guideline about how many spaces we should have available in a collaborative space? For example, 4 to 5 people might work with tech stuff together, whereas a physical project might be more or less people. I don't know if that's enough of a definition on that one. Or...
Well, I can take a stab at it. You know, I don't think there are, unfortunately, any hard and fast rules of thumb about this, because if you remember that dominoes slide, there are so many different ways that people are collaborating, especially in maker spaces, that we probably haven't even all envisioned yet. Some technologies just naturally are better suited to smaller groups, but there are some group projects that could be very large, in fact. So what I usually counsel clients about maker spaces is making sure that you program in, or in programming in architecture it's a term about, you know, kind of defining a certain space requirement. Programming in some free space, some flexible space that you know is available for either expansion of a group or task, or for additional technologies or additional tools that you didn't realize you would need at that time. So just before I was talking about how libraries kind of need to also lead their communities and push them forward, you might provide certain kinds of tools and things for people to collaborate with in a makerspace that the community didn't even know they needed. You know, they'd come in and say, wow, I had no idea I would ever even use this sort of thing, which might beget a comment about, well, if only we had this too, wouldn't that be great? And so providing enough flexibility in your layout to allow groups to expand and contract through tables that can be pushed together, through the ability to add additional technologies or different kinds of tools, is also an important thing. You know, I was talking about flexibility on a variety of scales before, and that comes right down into each of the spaces too. So being able to continue to respond to the evolution of both the kinds of activities and the sizes of them, how many people would be contributing to a particular effort is an important thing.
Great. I think what we're going to do now is wrap up the questions. So that will be the last question that we took. But I do have some other logistical closing things. I'd like to first of all thank Tracy for sharing her insights and tips on how we can all create better collaborative spaces within our libraries. We had some really great feedback and discussion here, so we're able to get a lot of your questions answered. We appreciate all of you sharing your time with us on that as well. You will be receiving a survey at the end of the webinar to let us know how we did. Please take a moment to fill it out. We'd love to get your feedback so that we can make these sessions even better in the future. Feel free to comment on other topics that you would like more information on or speakers that you'd like to hear from so that we can consider building some of those things into our future schedule. We've received great feedback from our previous webinars that has really helped us to focus on topics that you're all most interested in. Tomorrow you'll receive a follow-up to this presentation that will include a link to this webcast, so if you missed something or just wanted to review things, you can go back and refresh yourself on some of the topics or share with your colleagues. Next week you'll be receiving a second email that will include resources such as the slides, a Q&A log that documents and answers the questions that came up today, even those that weren't answered here, and some additional reference to materials that can give you more tools as you're preparing for your collaborative spaces. Again, thanks for joining us today. We'll be back next month on November 6th with a webinar presented by Tony Buzzio on Common Core and how it's an unparalleled opportunity for school librarians to shine. Feel free to register for this program and watch the Demco website for our 2014 program lineup. We'll continue sending emails announcing new webinars in the months to come. We hope that you'll consider joining us for some of these future events. And again, we're so glad that you joined us and hope that you have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.